Am I cowering?
Sucking out
Woo!
their happiness. They're sucking
The
out their
wokies
happiness
are
in
around
society.
me.
Oh boy. Hi. If you're on the left, chances are you've had a lot of brain-dead arguments just like this. The truth is, anti-woke warriors like Piers Morgan aren't winning because they're correct. They're winning because the left hasn't provided a convincing counter-narrative. My name is Harper. I study rhetoric so that you don't have to. And today, we're going to break down this Jubilee video and pull out the frameworks for effective communication so that you can learn not just what to say, but also how to think. Let's get into it.
All the following things have been blamed on toxic masculinity in the media in the last year and a half. Gang violence, climate change, being interested in cars and saying hello or have a nice day. So I have already committed at least one crime because I've already said hello to you.
That's
so
true.
my point being,
I'm actually really offended by that too.
Sorry?
I said I'm actually very offended by that too.
This is like a simple little joke, little piece of banter, but I think it's super important. Let's keep watching and see if we can figure out what Kyla's doing here.
When you look at like gender studies and philosophy on this, right, we use this term called masculinities and femininities because we understand that like the samurai era of masculinity looks very different than maybe the knights of the round table and whatnot. So we understand that masculinity has somewhat morphed and shifted. And in every form of these masculinities or femininities, there are unhealthy elements to each of them. Could you grant me that?
I love how Kyla is just like gently picking apart Piers' claims, right? Because his entire shtick depends on this notion that like woke liberals are offended by everything. So if you can just calmly and logically walk through an argument with somebody like this and introduce nuance into the conversation, then it totally falls flat. I think a lot of the resistance to left-wing ideas is not that they are extreme or that they're unpopular on their face. It's just that the way that people have seen these ideas be presented is in the most maximalist, like bombastic way possible, because that's what plays in the right-wing media circuit. It's a clip of some 19-year-old college student freaking out about like Ben Shapiro or whatever. So it's really important for people on the left to like show that you can engage in dialogue in a calm manner, right? So like, regardless of what Kyla says here or what she believes, like it's clear that she is in no way woke. And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that, because to me, wokeness is not an ideology. It's a mentality. So let's kind of define that mentality briefly, because I think it's going to help the rest of this conversation make a lot more sense, right? So to me, what defines wokeness, or like somebody who exhibits woke tendencies, I guess, is that like, number one, a wokey is unable to engage in nuanced conversation. They are not trying to find out whether something is true per se. They're trying to find out whether it's heretical, whether it's unpatriotic, whether it's revisionist, whether it's problematic. Number two, a wokey struggles to imagine how a reasonable, good person could possibly disagree with them. Every issue is a matter of, clear-cut right and wrong, and you're either on the good side or the bad side. Number three, a wokey seeks to use social and legal sanction to shut down quote-unquote dangerous opinions rather than working to provide people with a compelling counter-narrative. And like, to the extent that anti-woke people like Piers Morgan have had their day in the sun, I think it's because wokeism is real and it is a problem. And to the extent that Piers' whole like anti-woke shtick seems played out these days, it's because, number one, more and more people on the left are beginning to realize that this attitude isn't helpful, and they're changing as a result of that. Number two, we've seen in the past year that this mindset is not at all exclusive to the left. I mean, like, think back to the characteristics that I laid out just now, right? Somebody who doesn't seek the truth, they just seek to figure out whether something is like dogmatically correct or incorrect. They don't engage with people who disagree with them in good faith, and they try to shut people down rather than engaging in dialogue. I mean, that is in no way exclusive to the left. The right has identified it on the left and given it a name. The left has not, because the left generally sucks at branding, but it is what it is. I think that, for example, deporting someone for writing an op-ed or signing an op-ed, in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, pretty clear-cut example of this attitude on the right. In any case, when we watch the way that Kyla and peers interact, you can tell that even though Kyla may be socially progressive, she's not woke by any means, because she can have an actual conversation. She can engage with the topic at hand in a nuanced manner. So I think the way to pull the rug out from these anti-woke types is simply to have a calm, reasonable discussion with them. And once you kind of show that you're not just some bot, then they have to actually engage with your arguments instead of just doing the Piers Morgan, oh, woke liberals get offended by everything line.
The American Psychological Association released a set of guidelines to help psychologists work with men and boys, in which it stated that male masculine traits like stoicism, competitiveness, achievement, eschewal of the appearance of weakness, adventure and risk should all be discarded. Now, I would categorize all of those things as the very best of being a real man. Why would you want them discarded?
So this is a story that I imagine most left-wingers probably wouldn't be aware of. And if you want to effectively speak with right-wingers or anybody outside of your bubble, you need to know what these people are talking about in their own spaces. This is an absolutely essential skill for political discussions. So how do we keep up with what the other side is saying without watching Fox News for 5 hours a day? I'll show you the method I use. First, go to Ground News. It's an app and a website. I'm on the website right now. So Ground News processes thousands of articles every day and merges them together. That way you can see a story from every angle. I like Ground News because they don't pretend to be unbiased. They just aggregate all the news for you so you can get an overview of who's covering a story and how they're covering it. So how do we actually use this tool to prepare for political discussions? First, head over to their blind spot feed. This is going to let you see which stories are being covered by each side. That way, you can quickly understand what the right-wing media ecosystem is talking about. As you can imagine, this story about Zelensky meeting Trump is being covered very differently by the Huffington Post than it is by Breitbart. Plus, thanks to their ownership tracker, you can see who's funding any given publication. As you can see here, I'm able to get an exact breakdown of each outlet covering this story and whether it's independent or corporate. Because if you want to understand the news, you got to understand who's paying for it. I've loved Ground News. I've used it for years, ever since I was a competitive debater and needed to stay informed for my extemporaneous speaking event. I truly believe it's the smartest way to monitor the news, and I want you to try it for yourself. I managed to get you guys 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan. That brings the cost down to just $5 a month. Go to groundnews.com/Harper or scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description and the pinned comment to support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.
So the woke left have basically said, we hate fascists, we hate Nazis. In fact, we think everyone we don't agree with is a fascist and a Nazi. Led by Donald Trump.
That's an insane
led by everyone who
generalization.
voted for Trump.
I think Mason is right to point out the generalizations here, right? The core of Piers' argument and his rhetorical approach essentially relies on straw manning and hasty generalization, right? Taking these anecdotes and these edge cases and then extrapolating them out to make it this massive issue, right? So the way that we kind of combat this is we need to slow down our conversation partner. Whoever you talk to is likely to have a couple examples in their head that are really like needling them. And so you need to slow them down, ask them questions about it, and kind of get down to the fundamental principles of what you're talking about. Because if you're just arguing about individual anecdotes, you're never going to get to the fundamental core of the discussion. And you really need to do that if you want to make progress in a political conversation.
Well,
But you are-
that's like.
But you are collectively the most joyless group of people to ever walk
I'm pretty
on God's
joyful.
earth.
I'm smiling.
And my
I came
advice
in cracking jokes.
My
Piers.
advice is
I could get a beer with
my
you.
advice for all of you is
I think you need to relax a little bit.
It's hard to even commentate here because the conversation is so devoid of substance. Again, it's just like platitudes, anecdotes, generalizations, straw men, picking out the weakest or nuttiest part of the other side and then blowing that up and making it an issue, right? What you need to do is you need to introduce nuance, right? You need to press people to go one level deeper. And one way to do that is just to think, what are the unstated assumptions that are governing this interaction? That's where productive dialogue happens. It's not talking about specific cases, getting caught up in anecdotes or hypotheticals.
Where has free speech been violated
I've just
because of
given you-
cancel?
just given
No,
you
you
an
gave me
example.
one at Heathrow Airport.
I'll give you the New York
Where-
Post example.
Who has been arrested
I don't-
as a result of cancel culture?
don't-
Because someone has said something that was either bigotry racist, sexist, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and people
I-
are not entitled to have viewers
To be-
based on their opinions.
No, I'm not saying they are.
If people disagree with you, they can say, "Oh, we're not going to watch you anymore." They're
Yes.
going to go out in social media and say, "Hey, everybody, let's stop watching this person because he came out as racist."
100%.
Okay, and that's not a violation of free speech.
No, Sharon Osbourne was fired, as I just told you.
Also, not a violation of free speech.
Of course it was.
49 states are at-will employee states. Companies can fire you for any reason that
Yes.
is not related to discrimination.
I agree. Listen,
So
I've already
what-
said, I think you're misunderstanding me.
With all due respect for Shane, I don't think this is a very strong argument. I think that this line of thinking fails to actually deal with the substance of the debate at hand. The deeper issue here is that censorship, censorious attitudes, whether they're legally enforced in the case of arrests, whether they're culturally enforced in the case of cancellations, whether they're enforced by a corporation in the case of deplatforming, they create a chilling effect. They do. They absolutely, undeniably create a chilling effect. It is absolutely valid to be concerned about these things from a free speech perspective, whether or not people are getting arrested, whether or not this stuff is taking place on private platforms, whether or not it's technically legal to fire somebody at will. And I also think for the left, championing the ability for a private platform to engage in censorship is a really bad long-term play. Because what happens when the other guy gets in power, right? Hiding behind corporations who control public discourse, personally, that's not a standard that I'm comfortable upholding. And I think that we're seeing the negative ramifications of this, right? With Trump in the White House and Elon Musk in charge of Twitter and right-wing takeovers at CBS and other legacy institutions, we're seeing in real time what it looks like when the shoe is on the other foot. And it's not pretty. Fundamentally, this debate is not about the legality of people being banned from social media or fired from their positions. It's about the nature and limits of public discourse in the internet age. And if you refuse to actually engage with this topic, you'll lose out to people like Piers who are willing to. And to be fair, Piers seems a little bit more hesitant to tackle this when it comes to violations of free speech on the right. Many of which have actually ended in real arrests. But regardless, I think it's important to have a principled stance on this, not just as left-wingers, but as people who want to uphold a democratic society, to talk about, like, how can we promote public discourse and opinions that disagree with our own and positions that deviate from our own. And I think that to create this standard, we have to go deeper than just asking whether somebody has been fired or whether somebody actually got arrested.
My surrounded claim is that discussions of woke politics are merely a distraction from our common enemy, the billionaire class. So, as I just said, I think that these discussions of woke, whether we're saying that the problems in society are because of broke graduate students or people that are being mean to us on Twitter, ultimately it's all secondary to what really unites us. I think that it's woke to talk about the fact that the middle America, the industrial heartland of Britain have been hollowed out by forces of globalization, outsourcing jobs to places like China or India or Malaysia or Vietnam, and that these, talking about trans athletes, talking about what people choose to identify themselves as, it's all so unimportant. And 80, 90, 95% of what actually matters is what's gonna put more money in people's pockets, what's gonna let them have a dignified life for them and their family. And talking about wokeness, whether it's dead or alive, it's just a distraction, and it's really not important or relevant to most of our lives 95% of the time.
This is music to my ears. So what is Shane doing here? He's bringing it back to class. And I want to take a moment to really talk in detail about why a focus on material, class-based politics is so necessary. And there are really two main reasons why this is necessary, why the left needs to win over the working class as its base of support. Number one, because the working class represents the majority of the population, quite simply. Like, the majority of people are wage earners, they're workers. And number two, because the working class alone has control over production. The working class produces all the value in our economy. And because of that, the working class is in a unique position where it can actually enforce its demands. In short, if you want justice for the oppressed minority, you need to organize the working majority. And I think that the reason that the culture war has gotten so out of hand is that we haven't focused on material issues. The political institutions that would allow us to take on material issues in a meaningful way, rather than just kind of talking about them in a general sense, These institutions have atrophied. So if the left wants to succeed politically, we need two things. We need a strong labor movement and we need a strong labor party. Historically, since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, this has been the engine of the left's success, hands down. And I know this is kind of an odd place to take the video where it's like a rhetorical breakdown, but I do think this is at the absolute heart of the culture war and the debate around wokeness right now. It's an inability to address material issues, which makes cultural issues the only avenue for real political conflict. By the way, this doesn't mean we need to abandon minorities so we can focus on class. Quite the opposite, actually, because true justice requires changing the way that resources are distributed. And I'll give you some examples, right? Getting public transit access for disabled people, fighting for guaranteed maternity leave for new mothers, redistributing land to former slaves in the case of American Reconstruction. All of these transformative changes require taking on moneyed interests. Only the organized working class has the muscle and the incentive to do that. Without organized working class politics rooted in material issues, you get what we've gotten since 2020, which is basically this kind of cultural revolution led by human resources departments, nonprofits, and NGOs, which has led to a lot of radical sounding academic rhetoric and some superficial representation for minority groups, but has failed to move the needle in any material sense. And this isn't an accident, by the way. This is structural, right? Because all those institutions I just mentioned, HR departments, NGOs, nonprofits, they exist at the behest of the capitalist class. And because of that, they are, by definition, incapable of challenging the capitalist class. I think this is why most normal people intuitively understand that wokeism is hollow and have, by and large, rejected it. This conversation makes a lot of people on the left uncomfortable because once we've acknowledged this reality, it's an open question, where do we go from here? Am I saying that we need to abandon minorities to focus on class politics? Again, no. I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying that historically, centering class has been the only thing that's given the left the power to fight for justice for minorities. So if you, like me, are simultaneously tired of the culture war, but also value justice and want to see it advanced, I'm here to tell you there is a better way to do that sidesteps the culture war. And that is to rebuild the power of the working class. And again, that means two very specific things, right? A strong labor movement and a strong labor party. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is a difficult process. Unionizing a workplace is a lot harder than doing a land acknowledgement or a lot of sort of symbolic gestures. But organizing like this is one of the only proven ways to make life better for working people of all types. Again, all those things I just mentioned, public transit access, maternity leave, redistribution for formerly enslaved peoples, right? These are all material things that benefit everybody. And as a positive side effect, it will rob people like Piers Morgan of all their valid talking points and ensure that you never need to endure another brain-dead debate about wokeism again. If you want to figure out how to do that and learn how to talk about capitalism in a productive way, and you enjoyed this video, you'll enjoy this video. It's a breakdown that I did of another Jubilee debate with Patrick Bet-David, an entrepreneur, versus a bunch of anti-capitalists. Go watch that right now. Until next time, a better world is possible.